Welcome to Early Intervention Matters, the podcast that helps parents, teachers, and health professionals understand the diagnosis, treatment, care, and support of children with autism, ADHD, Tourette's, and other neurodevelopmental challenges. Your host, Dr. Inyang Takon, is a consultant neurodevelopment pediatrician, and she will provide insight through interviews, answering questions, and breaking down complicated topics. By sharing stories from parents and professionals in the field, we hope to make sense of what can be an overwhelming topic. Early intervention is crucial with children with developmental difficulties. Yes, early intervention matters. And now, here's your host, Dr. Inyang Takon.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. You're welcome to another edition or episode of Early Intervention Matters. And this is a podcast where we look at developmental science, we look at medical science, and we break that down into more practical and everyday functioning terms and with more compassionate action. So this platform has over the last 5 years been able to do so on different topics related to neurodiversity. So I'm Dr. Inyang Takon, consultant neurodevelopmental pediatrician and host of the Early Intervention Matters podcast. And this podcast helps parents, educators, clinicians, members of the public, family members to recognize signs, respond with confidence and know how to support their children. Because what we want children to do is to thrive and be the best version of themselves. And we know that there's a lot we can do together in supporting children. So please share these episodes with family members or friends or educators because we always have quite a wealth of information in it. So I'm really happy today Tiara Brumberg, who I was really delighted to meet on our podcast platform, Podmatch. And I was delighted to connect with Tiara and very interested in her work, very impressed about her work. And thank you, Tiara, for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to get Tiara to introduce herself a bit more and tell us a bit about herself before we get into the podcast.
Great. Well, I'm so happy to be here. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and then also an associate's degree as an occupational therapy assistant. So I've spent 5 years working in a pediatric dyslexia center with kids who have learning disabilities as well as ADHD or on the autism spectrum or other challenges. So I've definitely seen firsthand the huge difference it can make when we start those interventions early and get families involved and help them set up with the resources that we know they're also going to need as the kids mature and there's new challenges when there's transitions in school and education. So I'm so happy to be a part of this. I also have ADHD myself, and I am now the owner and lead coach of the Middle ADHD Coaching, where I work with students 16 and up, one-to-one, as well as families, helping them create systems that best support the adults and the children in the family. So there's structure and things that work for them and with their strengths and with how they already are operating to make things feel easier, as easy as they can be. Because personally, as again, a person with ADHD, with kids with ADHD, a big piece I know that affects that is the emotional regulation piece. And a lot of that is tied to knowing what's expected of you, feeling like you have the tools to be successful in those endeavors, and being able to have that just grace and support and encouragement of one another. Yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. And you talk about, I like how you put it about the messy middle of ADHD. So, what made you come about the term messy middle?
Yeah. So, several reasons. Big one, though, that comes up a lot in coaching with clients and is kind of the framework for coaching approach in general is, people have it within themselves to do the things they need to do. That's the paradigm we're kind of working from, is that each of us has talents, strengths, abilities, the ways that we've done things that inform how we can be able to have our abilities and outcomes match the things that we are capable of and that we're motivated to do. But the problem with ADHD a lot of times is we can know all the things that we need to do. We can very passionately want to do all of those things. They can be very intrinsically important to us to show up for the people that we love. And yet we can still have a huge problem with being able to execute them. So that in between can be such a difficult
Mm.
space to live in. So just wanting to meet people there in acknowledgement of their heart and their spirit and their goals, and without that judgment of, if only you cared more, if only you weren't so lazy, if only you weren't so disorganized, but recognizing more that imbalance, that's not their fault.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. And that really resonates because it's always interesting that when I see children who I'm managing for ADHD and some of who have been on medication, one of the commonest things that parents usually find frustrating is, oh, if only he could be more organized, if only he could do this, if only he could do this. And so this is a recurrent phrase that I hear, and parents are like, but why is this still happening? He's on medication and all that, but why is this still happening? And that's what really attracted me to your talk because I felt I really need this because this is something I come across quite often in the clinics. So you started out as a pediatric occupational therapy assistant. What was it you saw in those early days in the therapy room that quietly shaped the coach that you are today?
Yeah. So just working with these really bright, really intelligent, smart, fun, capable kids. And, the purpose of OT is we are going to work on things that are hard for you, which for people with ADHD, that can be a real point of challenge. We know that the number of microcriticisms that children receive before, we call it third grade here in the States. So about the age of 8 is 30,000 or something. And say it is way more than typically people get. So they're, in general, kids with ADHD are more aware of and exposed to reminders of all the things they're supposed to be doing. Oh, why didn't you do this? I thought I told you to do that. Why are you in this room now? You're supposed to be in that room. What happened to your shoes? We're leaving in 5 minutes. I thought you said you were getting ready. Um, the challenge with OT, obviously, though, is, those are the things we're going to do. What are the things we're looking at? What are the things that are hard for you? We're going to have you do those every time we see you for the whole session, which can be very difficult on these kids. But they do have buy in. They want to get better. And then there's that gap between what they want to be able to do and what they feel like their brains are allowing them to do because of ADHD. Their bodies want to move even though they're not supposed to. Their brains keep racing and thinking of other really interesting, exciting thoughts that are not on topic. And the pain and discomfort there from those kids just broke my heart, seeing that literally they want to impress me. They want to meet these goals. They want to meet the goals faster than anyone has ever met the goals
Mm,
before. They want to make everybody proud and impressed. And when they can't, they feel it.
mm,
They feel it. And it is heartbreaking. So that was kind of what led me to the coaching side of things is I would love to look more at what are the things you're really awesome at and where are the areas where you're not able to express that consistently because ADHD is getting in your way versus looking at it from that kind of deficit-based framework
mm.
that therapy uses.
That's so good. It's great. So your mom with ADHD and you were also raising neurodivergent kids while building a business as well.
Why not?
You're a superwoman. That's what we call superwomen.
Yeah.
How do you fit all this in on a normal school day morning?
Yeah.
What does this look like in your house? Because I see some families coming, and if they've got morning clinics, they're already coming like they're just coming from a huge war. You see the fights in the clinic rooms because the mother blaming him. "Yeah, we got here late because of him and all that." So what does your house look like in the mornings?
Absolutely. Well, and that was kind of a big piece of wanting to get into coaching was once I became aware of my own diagnosis of ADHD, even before it was formally a diagnosis and my kids were diagnosed, my education in ADHD and, the kinds of systems that best help people with ADHD really changed a lot about how our mornings looked in my house. And starting the days off in a better way, just overall, we were able to maintain and sustain that so much better. Having grace for each other, feeling like everybody has what they need. They have clear expectations. So that is one of the biggest things that I work on. Luckily, this is what because my kids are neurodivergent and I'm neuro, we have like this is a lab. So this is where we try out the things that I know have worked for us that help families. Before I was a coach, the mornings looked insane. It was stuff everywhere with me and my husband on top of the kids, constantly telling them what to do, like some kind of crazy traffic controllers with people who had never driven before, even though it was the same things every day in and day out. So, one of the biggest pieces we did was with each kid going through what are the things that you need to have in order to go to school each day? When do we get those in place so that you can sleep as late as you want and you don't have to do as much in the morning? So,
No.
I have a ninth grader. So I have like a high school student, a middle school student, and a first grader. So 14, 9, and 1. Really, it works out well because I've got a pretty good understanding of for those different age groups, what are reasonable expectations for a 6-year-old versus a 14-year-old in terms of getting themselves up, getting themselves going. So everybody takes ownership of that. And in our house, we call those our expectations.
Mm.
So we have what are your morning expectations? Those are the ways we unlock afternoon opportunities. So they want to do things like a little 30 minutes of screen time before they do their homework. They need some time
Mm.
to press. They have to have gotten those morning expectations done to have unlocked those afternoon opportunities, which obviously, like we said, are going to be different for each kid.
Mm.
Also, we have gone from telling kids what to do to asking questions as prompts, which is huge because telling kids what to do, we know reinforces the understanding that I am the expert of getting ready. I know all of the things that need to get done. So it is my job to cue you versus your job to know what you should do. And then I can prompt you with questions to help you get back on track if I notice that you're distracted by a dog or something else going on. So that's a piece of it is trying to move that ownership of executive functioning. A lot of times with young kids, we start in that survival mode. It is much quicker for me to grab all the things, pack all the things, throw shoes on you, throw you over my shoulder and put you in a car so we can get somewhere on time. And sometimes you have to do that. But at some point, making that intentional effort to have each person take over their own executive functioning skills so that everybody has their own piece can help with that ownership. And then having with ADHD, we know a big part of that is you earn this by doing this. So
Mm.
having those very clear expectations.
Mm.
And the other thing that we do is we look at things as an experiment, right? So if you are a family that right now is like that, you're showing up, people have half their clothes on and the other half are in their hand and they're putting socks and shoes on in your waiting room, or, everybody's frazzled. As a family, hey guys, how did we do this week? What is the goal we're trying to get to? So let's clarify. Well, our goal is to get somewhere. I would like to walk slowly into an appointment. Like, what would that feel like if we could all just have our shoes on, have our things together, right? And looking at where are we now? What's reasonable? We're not going to be all from one day, disheveled, a toothbrush hanging out of my mouth, to the very next day we try all of these things and suddenly we're 10 minutes early and
Yeah.
everybody's beautifully coiffed. Let's look at what is a reasonable progression of how do we get just a little bit closer and what is that goal that we're trying to build towards?
Fantastic. The reason I was laughing is like you're playing up my clinic day session with for me. It's just taking me to my Monday clinics where
Oh, yeah.
you expect different grades of that. So that's what was just making me, the vivid sight in which what happens every day. But
Yeah.
I like what you said is that, I think many times the adults feel a lot under pressure and they get very anxious and then they're getting more worked up and sometimes that leads to all the frustration and the negative emotions that then comes up towards the kids because the adult is frustrated
Yeah.
and that the
Yeah.
child with ADHD is just doing their thing.
Absolutely.
Great. So, just going from, and this is again a very key point, which I see. I always think about this, and I think this is one of the things that motivated me to do podcast and do this is because I always felt, yes, I've gone through the assessment process and families have reached the point where they've gotten the diagnosis. And then they sit down and you've given them the diagnosis and they look at, okay, so what? And I don't know about the states, but we have, when we've got something called the NICE guidelines, which directs how we treat ADHD in the UK. So it tells you behavioral training programs first, you do that, and then if things haven't worked out, you go and do medication and things. So these are usually the options that we can offer parents, and then schools put in reasonable adjustments. And it's always the behavior training programs. Some of the charities have tried to create some more ADHD specific ones, but a lot of the behavior programs that you're sending the parents to, it's almost like they're just going into an ether. You're just saying, go here and
Yeah,
do this. And it doesn't always work for everybody. So some families are very busy, they're working, they can attend those sessions when
right,
they're being held.
right.
And then you see this frustration mounting because you almost feel that Lord is, I want to give you something more about things that you can do at home to help your child,
Yeah,
but I'm just at a loss about what to do.
yeah,
And I think this is where one of the things that families face is like, okay, I've been given the diagnosis, but it's almost like we're starting another journey about living this life with ADHD. So have you seen families express that almost like post-diagnosis grief? And what does it feel like for the parents that you've spoken to?
absolutely. Yeah, that's every family I talk to. Also, I think a huge piece, especially of an ADHD diagnosis in particular, we know the heritability rates have been reported to be anywhere between 70 and 90%, where if you've just diagnosed a child with ADHD, there's a very high likelihood that one, if not both parents, also have ADHD. So, and then inherent in that is we know the criteria for ADHD is difficulty with initiation, difficulty with sustained attention, definitely with organizing and planning and prioritizing. So, you give a person who has all of these challenges a very big stack of papers that has really wonderful suggestions and ideas. And now that person who has all of those challenges has to figure out, where do I start with all of this?
Mm,
What do I do first? And a lot of times, what I see for families is, especially families where we know there is that genetic component and there's parents with ADHD, it depends on how severely ADHD is impacting their family and to what extent.
mm,
So if they're like, this is information, but things are crazy, but whatever, we're getting places, we might be late, but we're paying bills, we're doing this. A lot of times I think that looks like not doing anything right away until we
mm,
get to some kind of point of crisis where we're no longer able to kind of slap things together. And then we know that's what fuels dopamine for parents, makes it feel more important. It's almost the procrastination of organizing
mm,
services, where now all of a sudden they're reaching out to me because maybe they got a diagnosis 6 months ago, but now their kid's about to fail out of school. They're about to lose their job. It's usually something like that that gives them enough fuel to want to be able to navigate that challenge of, where do I start? What do I do next?
mm.
So typically, what I try to start out with are, I love the book Smart But Scattered, Peg
But
Dawson.
yeah.
Yes. So I've put together just kind of some, like, a one pager of, like, here's just a basic framework of things to understand about ADHD, what this could look like behaviorally in a home, some key things to kind of focus on to get started. And then same, trying to connect people to resources. What is the biggest need right now? What is causing the most friction? But yeah, I think it is very challenging.
Yeah. It is. And I think once we see them for reviews and things, this is one of the huge things that parents just feel. So, yeah, we got given the diagnosis, but they say things have gotten worse. Nothing's changed. And you find out a lot of it is around their executive function, day to day activities. And some families, when you mention coaching, that the child needs a coach, they wait until crisis point. But what's the ideal thing? When should they be thinking about a coach?
Yeah.
Some families think one or the other. And I say to them, actually, I feel that the two things should be going hand in hand. because that's when you get more benefit because yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of the families and individuals I work with also see therapists and counselors because I'm always very quick to delineate,
Mm.
therapy versus coaching. I am definitely a huge proponent of early intervention in that regard. So I don't directly coach kids under 16, but I do coach families. So that's where I'll come into a family.
Okay.
What are your current systems? What does the morning look like? What does bedtime look like? What does homework time look like? We know those are kind of a lot of times the biggest
Yeah.
sources of dysregulation. And if
Yeah.
we can get those kind of sorted, it usually provides a pretty good framework. If we can get those times of day, have good systems for those, usually we can use the models and the framework for how we got that sorted to kind of
Mm.
help teach families the kind of scripts and ways to look at other things as they come up. So
Mm.
a lot of times that is parent education. It is looking at, age of kids, what's a reasonable expectation for them to be able to do things for themselves? What should they be able to do? How close are they to doing that on their own now versus how many cues are you giving them? So, working backwards from the current level of support and getting them closer to independence for the things that are reasonable for their age, taking into account there's that developmental delay, developmental delay
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
executive functioning skills for kids with an ADHD diagnosis.
Yeah. And I like what you said. It's working backwards and taking it for what is expected. I think sometimes there's a mismatch with what parents demand of children for certain ages. So I like the fact that you're going back and looking at expectations because I think it's really important to look at expectations. Sometimes in my clinic, you'd see parents saying, "But he's not doing this himself." And I said, "No, look at his age. What? How old is he?" And
Yes.
obviously, his ADHD is even going to be lower in terms of the expectations. So I think that's really good to keep reminding them of that. And you work alongside clinicians instead of working in isolation. And how does that what was the benefit of that and of collaborating with other clinicians and therapists?
I think one of the big ones is just wanting to make sure, especially with ADHD, again, like part of coaching with this population is you do have a fair amount of where it can be tempting to want to go down a rabbit trail, especially in working with adult clients or parents who are trying to get better systems for their family and trying to
Mm.
talk about, what's currently working for your system that can often lead to it. Well, growing up, this is the way we did things. And so now, I don't want to be the kind of parent I had, or I didn't like how my parents yelled at me. So I don't want to yell at my kids, but and that can become a detractor from being able to come up with actually spending that time in a way that's constructive towards let's build your system.
Yeah.
But it is important to look at how does the system you grew up with, how does that influence your ability to do the thing that you know you should do, but feels a little
Mm.
bit uncomfortable because maybe you feel like you want to do something different. I think that's where being able to say, like, I think that's a fantastic idea to look into this. It sounds like that's a really big piece of what might be creating a barrier for you. During our time and in our session, how about we look at what would be the most useful to you to have at the end of this session so you feel like you have something you can work on? And then how do you feel about making a note to follow up with your therapist about this in your next session to make sure you're given an opportunity to explore
Mm.
how that might inform the choices that you make today? So, being able to kind of separate that out so that
Mm.
we protecting our time and also making sure that they are, we're not spinning our wheels because maybe the bigger thing is, yeah, there's a lot more to my childhood. And that's where we might recommend, like, why don't we take a break from coaching while you feel like you get a better handle on that if that's a thing
Yeah.
that's important to you. And then I'm here, like reach out whenever you'd like to get in touch. I'm happy to meet with you. You just let me know what you need. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yes. I think this is so important for our audience is that sometimes we get so focused on the child and we're so driven by what we feel is the right way. And we hardly take a step back to think about how our behaviors and parenting might be. It just reminds me. So I've got two daughters; they're adults now, and my husband used to, I remember the early days of schooling. He was more, oh, it's got to be done this way, this time, this, that. Yeah, and the children are different in their different ways. And sometimes he found it difficult to just be that flexible to adapt to its child's way. And some of this was also because of the way he was brought up as well. And we had to go through a lot of talking and saying, look, no, yes, you need to slow down on this and do it a different way. But I can imagine this is some of the challenges lots of families face, where you've kind of grown up with the notion of this is how it's got to be done, and trying to just move back a bit from that can be difficult.
Yeah.
Good. So going down to executive function, if you could define for us a bit for our audience, just to be clear what executive function is and how it impacts the whole day, what it looks like in the school, what it looks like at home, so that, you know, our audience can understand these different parts of executive function.
Yeah. So, executive functioning skills are things like working memory. So, being able to, like a simplistic version is you're about to go to the grocery store. You don't have a paper list. So, you're keeping in mind the things that you need to get. So, and then maybe even before the grocery store, you've got to get gas in your car and you also need to pick up the dry cleaning or something. So, being able to hold in your mind multiple multi step processes, executing them in an order that makes sense, not getting distracted or off track or losing track of what it was you were doing. There's also the initiation of being able to do things. So a lot of these skills overlap. So for example, when you wake up in the morning, you've got an alarm hopefully that's getting you up. So at some point the night before, you looked at what do I have to do tomorrow? So you planned and you looked at your calendar, you saw where you have to be somewhere, you worked backwards, figured out what time you had to get up. Then you went over to your alarm clock. You kept your attention, sustained attention long enough to set that alarm clock successfully. You got to bed, you wake up in the morning. So now we have actually getting up to the alarm clock. So that would be inhibitory control. You have this desire to stay in bed because
It sounds like me every
you
morning.
don't want to actually get up, but you have that goal directed task persistence. So that is that another executive functioning skill where you say, I don't feel like getting up, but I know I have to get up because
Yeah.
when I set this alarm, I made it for the latest time possible. So this is a like do or die, get out of bed situation. So even though your impulses are telling you you don't want to do it, you're overriding that impulse. You are using your ability to choose and you're getting up. And then once you get up, it's what do I do first? So that working memory of, well, I need to brush my teeth. I need to get dressed. I've got to go to the bathroom. I've got to feed the dog. So what do you do first and in what order? And then actually starting those processes when you are cozy in your pajamas and you don't want to be cold when you get changed. So being able to follow through, also the time management of it, of, you know what, like I actually should have set my alarm 30 minutes sooner. And now I don't have time to do all these things, or it feels like I don't have time to do all of these things. So, time management, time blindness is a big thing with ADHD, and that's a huge executive functioning skill. We know
Mm.
that time is not actually just time. So 15 minutes of something that we like to do feels like it takes 2 seconds. 15 minutes of something we don't like to do feels like it took 10 years. And for people with ADHD, we anticipate that in advance. So when we are looking at how much time we have before we leave somewhere, it is variable every day. If we got up at the same time and leave at the same time, but there's maybe you also have to remember to grab a birthday present for somebody. Our ability to adjust and be able to interpret and expect how much time things will take is very challenging. So and that's just getting out of bed. So all day long, everything that we do, we know there are several executive functioning skills that are required and that are overlapping. And a lot of times, especially with kids, we do a lot of those for them. We are getting them out of bed, sometimes literally getting them out of bed, pulling
Mm.
bodies out of their beds. We are choosing their clothes for them and giving them to them. We are standing over them saying, you've got 2 minutes. We've got to go. We've got to go. We've got to go. So when we are doing that, and again, sometimes there's seasons where it feels like you've just got to do that. You have a job that's new, you can't be late. It can be stressful. teaching those things in those times. But the more we do those skills for them, they're not needing to practice their impulse control. They're not needing to practice their planning because you set the alarm. They're not needing the thing that their brain learns is you are the executive functioner and your job is to tell them to do the things, which is fantastic news to an ADHD brain because we don't want to do the things at all. And now we have a reason to maybe not have to do them because it's on
Somebody's
you
gonna do
to
it.
tell me to do it, and I'm hoping you're real frazzled because if you forget to do it, you forget to tell me. It's no longer my fault that I didn't do a thing. You didn't tell me to do the thing. So it yeah, it's a lot and we know that all day long we're using all of those skills in different ways that overlap. So that's where by the end of the day especially, we have so much dysregulation. It can be hard to figure out what to eat for dinner. It can be hard to figure out what you want to watch on TV because you've had to make all of these decisions all day long.
Yeah.
So that is a battery that drains. So, and especially as a parent, we know it drains if you're not just running your own executive functioning skills, but it's like you are the supercomputer and everybody has plugged their cord into you and you are also powering everybody else's laptop of they're waiting on you on the instructions and the programming to do everything, even though they're repetitive things that they could technically do on their own.
Gosh, you've given me some great phrases for my clinic. This is amazing. I think you've just explained it in the most beautiful way I've ever heard because it's like you can see where that child has been through the day. Parents say, well, by the time he gets home, he's completely having a meltdown, he's lashing out. But this child has been trying to cope through the school day and that battery drains, and this is parent is trying to manage two or three neurodivergent kids facing their work doing all this and just trying to get everybody together. So no wonder things end up the way they do. Yeah. So what does this look like for the older teenager?
So for older teenagers, we also have, that compounded stress of that I feel like we put on pretty early in the schools of, so what are you going to do? What are you
Mm,
going to do forever? And we know with people with ADHD, a lot of times we can feel, especially, there can be a big pressure there of not wanting to waste efforts. School for a lot of these people is very exhausting, very tiring. They require a lot of support to stay on top of assignments, to get things in on time. So it can be hard to keep them motivated with thinking about university, thinking about college, thinking about what they want to do when it feels like, that's going to require more school, which is not necessarily a thing I want to do. And I definitely don't want to go to school just to go to school because
mm,
why, right? If it's a thing I don't like and there's not a clear goal, we know motivation is a huge piece with ADHD. So we need to have some kind of motivator, preferably a positive motivator. And a lot of that is having very clear goals of where you're trying to get and why. It is so much easier to do hard things if you're excited about what you get at the end.
mm.
It is a lot harder to do really hard things if you don't really know why you're doing them, aside from the fact that your parents tell you to do them or you feel like society tells you to do them.
Mm,
In addition to that, we've got puberty and hormone fluctuations, and we know that that affects the same neurotransmitters that are affected
mm.
with ADHD. We've got those changes in estrogen or progesterone. We've got all that stuff going on where serotonin and dopamine levels can be affected. We also have the social dynamics and developmentally as teenagers. We know that's where they're starting to figure out who am I
Yeah,
apart from my family, what is important to me and why do I want to do it? And
yeah,
for kids with ADHD, figuring out who am I, just me as a person. Well, a lot of what I've been told about who I am is, I don't like doing hard things. I'm kind of lazy. I'm late all the time. So trying to really get them in a strengths based mode can be challenging. We also
mm,
know there's a high comorbidity with anxiety and depression.
mm,
And taken into account social media and how that feeds that monster, it's really hard to be a teenager with ADHD, also knowing that they're probably developmentally on par with a 12 or 13-year-old
yeah.
making choices of a 16, 17, 18-year-old. So it's very difficult. And then the pressure from parents
Difficult.
feeling like however successful you are is a reflection of how good of a job I have done. And that can be very dysregulating, and it can create a space where those conversations maybe aren't always
Yeah.
looking at your kid and what they need. They can be more sometimes, unfortunately, shaped by culturally, what am I supposed to be able to make you do so that it seems like we're doing all the right things?
And that's one of the things I see, especially when I have to see children from different cultures where, the concept of ADHD is seen very differently. Some families almost they can't mention it with it. It's been quite interesting because I've seen families where they know there's something different about their child. They want to seek help, but they've got family members who are saying absolutely not. There's more attributed to their parenting, saying that bits about wanting to know to do what they feel culturally is acceptable for them
Right.
drives the pressure on parents sometimes. And I do see this, which is one of the reasons why I'm very keen on getting different populations, different cultures to understand neurodiversity because their perspective does shape the way they support the kids. Parents usually give up. I've seen parents give up on trying strategies uh, quite quickly, and they say, "Oh no, that didn't work." Um, we've tried that. We've tried that for how many days? It didn't work. We tried it for a week. It didn't work. What's your perspective, and what do you feel makes a strategy actually stick in a neurodiverse household?
Yeah. I think one thing is, again, I think with a lot of people with ADHD, there can be a tendency to have that all or nothing thinking.
Yeah.
We know cognitive flexibility is an executive functioning skill, but I always say there are those of us with ADHD, you can tell we're doing well. Like we're meal planning, we're eating right, we're exercising, everybody's on time, everybody's great. Or we are eating horribly, no one's exercised, we haven't left the house in a month, and we can't find anyone's shoes. Like there's very rarely an in between.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's a piece of it is looking at a strategy. What does successful use of a planner look like to a person with ADHD or even possibly to a neurotypical person? Successful use of a planner they might say it's I write everything in every day and I always do the things it says to do and I'm always there on time and I everything goes in this one same spot. That is very overwhelming to someone with ADHD who has trouble committing to the same style or
Mm.
anything for very long. We know we get very bored with routine, but we also know we need structure. So the way we work on it is we phrase things as experiments, and I recommend weekly check-ins. So the
Mm.
experiment is, well, first, what is the problem we're having? We are all late all the time. It's starting to get you in trouble on your team with sports. You're having to sit on the bench. It's getting me in trouble at work. So we need a system for that. What should we try? Come up with that as a family. If kids help contribute to developing a system, they're more likely to want it to work than if it's something
Mm.
that you tell them to do. Because especially if it's something silly, obviously there's got to be some kind of like parental control here so that it's not too but if your student says I think I would be more on time if I could listen to music the whole time I'm getting ready and get dressed in your bedroom, you're like, okay, we can try that. For if you think that would make you successful, how will we know that that works? What's that measure of success? Well, you will be at the door at this time dressed and ready to go, right? So let's check in a week from now on that. Were you ready to go on time? If not, what got in the way of that being a successful strategy? So part of it is having very clear defined, how do we know it worked? What are the signs that it didn't work? Because sometimes a piece works, but a piece doesn't. So we're going to
Yeah.
use a family calendar. We tried a family calendar. It was terrible. No one looked at it. Okay. Where was it? What
Mm.
was the system for putting things on the family calendar? Was it just whenever something came up, you were supposed to leave what you were doing and walk all the way into that room? Or is it every night right after dinner, you are sitting there with your emails, your texts, whatever, and you're writing things on the family calendar? So, how do we
Mm.
support new strategies by building them into routines that you already have going? So, we're calling that habit bundling. How do we connect this new thing to a pre-existing thing that is already consistent within your home, we already know that gives us a better chance of the thing being successful. If you for a week use the calendar religiously, everybody writes everything on it, but you're still late, well, now we've identified it's not the calendar. But I wouldn't say that that failed. So some of
Mm-hmm.
that is reframing. All of this is information.
Mm.
Trying things so we can gather information to find out the best system that works for you. So there are things we can learn when a strategy doesn't work by figuring out which pieces weren't helpful that help us. How do we go from there?
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think this is really helpful for me as a clinician because it helps me to give parents a broader perspective when looking at these things. Because they come in quickly and say, oh, this didn't work, so we've stopped doing that,
Right.
rather than looking at how can we reframe this. And I like what you said about reframing the strategies and just looking how you can be flexible and accommodate things there. Great. So, have you seen moms who only got diagnosed after their child was diagnosed with ADHD? And what is it what's the pattern that you see in these mothers who suddenly then recognize that they themselves might have ADHD?
Yeah. So it's probably 2/3 of the women that I work with were diagnosed after their children were diagnosed.
Two-thirds. Okay.
There are the ones who, and then the ones that weren't are often women who were diagnosed as children because they were hyperactive versus inattentive.
Okay.
And typically, what I've seen with most of those is parents tried to get them on some kind of medication. It made them feel like a zombie, especially women of my generation. And I know my brother is on the spectrum. And I remember originally they were thinking more ADHD and tried medication with him. And back then, it was like my brother disappeared and he wasn't talking as much. He was doing things, but he was gone. So, a lot of those women who were diagnosed earlier, many of them had kind of negative relationships to medication and it changing who they were as a person, which then later informed whether or not they got their kids diagnosed and wanted to do medication for their kids. And then
Mm,
those ones that do ultimately come to me for coaching, it's usually some version of, but my kid really needed this help. So we tried medication with
mm.
them, and now they've seen that it's actually gotten a lot better in terms of medication management. And so
Okay.
now they're wondering, hey, maybe there is hope for me that things could be easier than they've
Yeah.
been. But for the late diagnosed moms, and even the ones who knew early, and even with dads, I'll say, I've heard this too, is there's some guilt, I think,
Mm,
there, especially knowing the heritability component of like, I had such a hard time and I hate that now my child is having such a hard time. And
yeah.
also with that emotional dysregulation piece of ADHD, seeing
Mm,
those challenges in your kid and feeling like you can't spare them from the hard things you went through,
yeah.
it can unfortunately create what looks like anger or frustration, which is actually shame or guilt.
Yeah.
And so that looks like a lot of battles, emotional struggles, difficulty communicating. And it really is a fear based response that just kind of pings back and forth. So, but oftentimes, what the diagnosis, that's where we start looking at leading more from that perspective of grace for yourself, grace for
Mm,
them. And that co regulation piece is so,
mm.
so big. And also as the adult, being able to recognize those patterns during the day where those times where you're most likely. I always say it's like there's a thermometer and people with ADHD during seasons where we're real busy, we might wake up at a 5 because we have a new boss, we've started a new job, we've just moved to a new town, our kids switched to a new grade, we keep hearing from the teacher. So maybe
Yeah.
we've been waking up at a 6 or a 7. By the time we get to bedtime, dinner time, those days, that time of day where our kids are also their batteries are down, when you've asked them to go brush their teeth and it's been 30 seconds and they're still on the couch playing with the dog, if you were at a 2 or a 3, that might look like, "Hey, buddy, do you remember what you're supposed to be doing next?" But when you're at an 8 or a 9, because now you need them to go to bed so you can be done and have a moment to
Yeah.
yourself, that looks like, "Why do I always have to remind you to brush your teeth? I've said this 50 times. You know it's bedtime. You know it's time to
Yeah.
brush your teeth." So, a lot of times that looks like helping parents just build that metacognitive skill of let me go ahead and know bedtime is going to be rough and I've had a long day. What can I do for
Mm,
10 minutes to go regulate myself so that I'm not surprised when they need
mm,
that cue a second time to brush their teeth? I'm going to already have that script in my mind of what I'm going to say. Because by the time I'm at a 9, the part of my brain that has access to the really nice words I want to use is going to be offline.
mm.
But if I can already think about that, if I can cognitively preload, I'm about to leave this sanctuary of a bathroom where I've been hiding for 10 minutes, and my kid
Yeah,
is probably still in their clothes and they have not done anything. I'm just going to go ahead and assume that's what I'm walking out to.
yeah.
When that happens, I want to say this. I want to say, "Hey, buddy, I know it's been a long day. Can you tell me the next 2 things you need to do to get ready for
Okay.
bed?" Right? So, taking that moment so you can already know what you're walking out to, how you're gonna handle it, and getting yourself to a place where you are lowered from a 7, 8, 9 back down to a 3, and not being mad at yourself about that, but just saying, "I know this is a thing that's probably gonna happen, not because I'm a bad mom, not because I'm
Mm.
tired, not because of anything else, but because we're all tired. So I'm just gonna know this is probably gonna happen, and this is what I want my response to be."
So that's good preparation is key, isn't it? Not bumping into it because that's
Yes.
what happens. You just come in. And I remember in the days when I was doing my postgraduate training where it was very busy and on calls and all that. And then I'll come to the house and then this will be here and this will be here. And you already feel yourself being here. It's like nobody cared to do these things. I've got to come back and do all these things now.
Right.
And then you tell family, tell the kids, and people have different reactions to it. People would be like, "Oh no, no, no," and then that sets you up again. So I can imagine coming into the house for some moms and having to deal with all these things.
Right.
It can be quite challenging. So if we go on to, it is quite tough for moms, isn't it? It's quite tough for
Yeah.
a lot of the mothers because a lot of some of them haven't had their ADHD identified. So, if you were giving an advice to clinicians who are doing the assessments and the diagnosis, what would your advice be to the clinicians in terms of, when you're having this discussion with them, with the families, what will your advice be?
Yeah.
Especially to the mothers as well.
Yeah. So that's advice if I'm assuming, like, maybe mom isn't diagnosed at this point with ADHD, but
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
sometimes late to appointments. She seems a little bit scattered. We think
yeah,
there might be so I do think probably a lot of people it's hard when you're in something, as I'm sure you've experienced, when you're like, I'm just immersed in ADHD all the time between my house, my career, the things I like to listen to. So you just kind of assume a general level of knowledge,
knowledge, yeah,
and that isn't necessarily there. Saying, just to make you aware, there can be a very high heritability rate with ADHD. So if you have any thoughts or questions about that for yourself, here's places you could look. Something along those lines of just kind of making them aware, keeping it very much about the facts and the research versus like, it seems like you also struggle with, like, I'm noticing you're dysregulated. Have you been tested? Just say, like, especially knowing for women in particular, we know there can be a very high masking component.
yeah,
Like, your kid has been diagnosed with ADHD. Just want to let you know that there is a lot of research that has come out that the heritability rate of ADHD is very strong, can be 70
yeah,
to 90%. And in addition to that, we have found that a lot of women only get I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but I think more women are getting diagnosed because their kids get diagnosed than women are just randomly going in and having themselves tested. So
mm,
there are a lot of women who find out about their own ADHD diagnosis once their children have
mm,
been diagnosed with ADHD. If
yeah.
this is something that you would like more information about, just let us know. It's a referral we make all the time. And here's somewhere we know that we really trust where you could go talk to somebody if you have any thoughts or questions.
I think that's a really useful approach. I think that approach, because we do say we say it as well. I mean, sometimes we've seen it and not really said anything, but I think the parents have reflected on the children's presentation. And sometimes they've come back to the clinic several months later to say, oh, I got diagnosed. Yeah. And I'm on medication. And sometimes you've suspected it. But I think the approach that you've mentioned is quite good, to talk about the facts and then you're allowing them to know what is out there and make an informed choice of whether they want to go and get themselves assessed.
Yeah. Especially if you do those adult assessments in house,
Yeah.
again, like we giving parents another job of like, now your new homework is to call this other business, see if they take your insurance, make an appointment, show up for that appointment on time, figure out childcare for the kids so you can go,
Yeah.
versus like, you can have that done in house if you're interested, or here's a business that we often refer people to that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And here's the person you could reach out to. Their number is on this card.
So that's a really good approach. And so we move on to transition, which can be a really difficult time. And it's one of the most challenging periods I have in my clinic because you've seen these young people through and they're now getting to the point where they're leaving your service. So in my service, we transfer them to adult services at 18. But the problem is the adult services is not as robust as the pediatric service because we've got specialist nurses, we've got people following them up as well. Parents know how to reach out
Right.
when they're concerned. And suddenly, I mean, it's a point where a lot of parents do, shed tears because it's like I'm going to the land of the unknown.
Yeah.
They've got this fear. It's like, what's going to happen now? So, what do you think about transitions and teens and just supporting them through that process with their ADHD?
Yeah. I think a big piece of that, just like with teaching kids how to know when to set their alarm in the morning, is modeling those executive functioning skills. You're 17. We know in a year you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
transitioning to managing this yourself. Let me show you the things I do to set up your appointments. So here's
Hmm.
who we're going to call. Here's where I look on our calendar to see when those appointments go in. Here's where I keep track of it. So I make sure I get a reminder. If you take medication, at what point are you calling in that refill? How many pills do you need to have left based on how long it takes to refill those prescriptions? So there's ways as parents often that we are doing things that we don't often think to explain to our kids how we
Yeah.
decided to do it that way. So being able to say to your kid, when I go to take my pill every day, I look in the bottle. When I look at the bottle, if I can see there's enough to cover the whole bottom of the bottle, I know I'm good. But if I take one the next day and now the bottom of it's not covered, that's about the time I need to go ahead and call in the next prescription because it takes 3 to 4 to 5, however many days once I make that phone call. So, or if I know it's every 30 days, then when I pick up my prescription, the day that I pick it up, I put a calendar reminder. I put an event in my calendar on this day, that's day 26. Call the pharmacy to refill my prescription. Whatever that system that you are using, or even giving them those two, or if they can come up with another one, or even saying, this is how I've done it. What do you think you might do? What's a strategy you might like to try? Because sometimes they come up with, well, I'm going to keep my pill bottle next to my calendar, and somehow that's going to remind me to keep track of whatever. Who knows? Um, Having them start taking over more of that. In the beginning, it looks kind of like a medical based model. I'm going to do it with you, and then we're going to do it together, but you're going to take the lead, and then you're going to explain it to me like you're teaching me how to do it. By the time you're 18, you've already, hopefully at this point, started making your own appointments, started telling me, hey, it's time to call the pharmacy for that prescription, or even calling that in yourself if you're able to. So, starting that early, knowing the kinds of specific logistical challenges that are going to be created by kids managing it themselves. And that can also hopefully look like even a checklist of like, here's the things I need to do. The first week of the month in my calendar, I'm always going to have a call the doctor about this, the second week, or so on. So I think with ADHD, a lot of times what causes challenges is when we are surprised by things. And
Mm.
as much as possible, looking at the things that are repetitive creating a system for that, because we know the more often we do something, the easier it becomes to do it.
Mm. Yeah, that's because this is just one of those. It's amazing how this group, the teenagers and those young adults, it's amazing how much they struggle about this time, but how
Mhm.
little resources there to support them. I think
Yeah,
it's almost that they're forgotten.
right.
And then the next minute, you're saying go to adult services.
Right.
Whereas the pinch point and all these things, because this is where they're beginning to step into career choices and all these things. So, how do you work around with families around this?
So when we're looking at transitions, either, here in the States, that for us also looks like the elementary to middle school to high school to college.
Mm,
So we always want to look at what are the things that they need to be able to manage for themselves? What's the expected new level of independence that we can anticipate when they get to this point? A lot of those transitions, aren't surprises. They're age based, they're grade based. So being able to look a little bit further down the road and say, if we need them to get to here, let's start this process earlier. So even, driving a car, keeping track of appointments, being able to know where to look if you're confused about something, being able to call a place and just ask somebody a question. What are the things that we as adults are doing all the time that we've just do that maybe we're like needing to explicitly teach those to our children with ADHD? Whereas with a neurotypical person, they might just intuitively pick that up by watching what their parents do. We know we need to have more of that explicit instruction.
mm,
So that's a big piece of it, is not waiting. Of course, if they wait, also, I tell them, I'm like, sometimes there's other stuff that happens that's more important. I get a lot of parents who, once we meet, there can be, again, shame or guilt of, why didn't I do this sooner? They've struggled for so long. If I'd done this sooner, we wouldn't be in this place. And I always tell them, you probably weren't sitting back doing nothing. You were probably putting out all the little fires in front of you every day as they.
yes.
So expecting yourself in the past to have started putting out a fire that didn't exist yet isn't fair. So we can deal some things, we really can only deal with them as they come, but to the extent that we're able with predictable transitions like that, being able to look at, especially for your kid, what are the pieces of that that are going to be more difficult? Because we know ADHD is different and there's different challenges. So maybe
Yeah.
your kid is really extroverted and calling 14 businesses to talk to a secretary to see where they should go doesn't ruffle them at all. And for some kids, talking to somebody on the phone is the most painful thing they've ever done.
Absolutely.
So, what pieces of the things they're going to need to do would be challenging, and doing that with them for a time, uh,
Mm.
and doing that slowly. So, the scaffolding is really important.
And what do you say about there's some parents who just find it very difficult to let go? It's like, they're doing it with the child, but they're doing it for the child, and the child is not even allowed to. It's almost like the child doesn't really have a voice because the parents just feel they can't do it right, so they've got to be the ones doing it. So
Mhm.
what advice do you have for parents like that?
Yeah. First of all, just it sounds like they love their kids a lot whenever that's happening. I think that ultimately comes from a place of love,
Mm,
also from a place of fear. Again,
yeah.
the things that we know parents of ADHD most likely have, there is that anxiety. And with that, a lot of times, with ADHD, sometimes they're like, oh, people don't like predict what's going to happen. We're only in the moment, thinking of in the moment. Well, we do, but we conversely also take one moment in time and we can expound it over the course of human history and assume that because I let them be late for first period today, they are never going to be on school to ever again. They're going to live in my basement and I'm going to be supporting them for the rest of my life. um, there There can be a fear a lot of times of wanting to save our kids from the struggle. But then a lot of times, what I end up talking to parents about is like, what made you so successful? How have you gotten to a point where you've been able to do all these things for yourself? And it's most likely because they struggled and learned how they needed to do things. And that removing the struggle actually removes the opportunity to learn to do things. So
Yeah.
it is very well intentioned. Also, we don't just shove someone off an airplane all of a sudden out of nowhere with no parachute because we feel like we should all of a sudden teach them to be self-sufficient, right? Let's do that in a way that also gives them success. So if you are a parent who has been doing everything for your kid all the way through university, they are 17, you're getting close to where they're about to go. It can feel like, let's just stop doing everything because I just heard this amazing podcast and we have to stop doing everything for our kid because we are removing opportunities to learn. And now this kid who has had everything done for them has nothing done for them. They fall on their face. They feel like, what's the point in trying? And then
Yeah.
they're completely over it. So again, looking at where are we now? How much are we
Yeah.
doing for them now? How can that scaling back look like? It usually is less prompts. It's the kid telling you when they're going to check in with you versus you check in with them, but methodically pulling that support back in a way that is still supportive and shows you're available, as opposed to just all or nothing approach.
Wow, you've given us some real great, great stuff tonight. And I just feel the families need to hear this because it's quite interesting, things are going on. Then it gets to that period
Hmm.
where things had been stable for a while, parents were feeling in control, and they get to this teenage period. And I just feel that we need to be better at managing that and supporting the families. Unfortunately, when they're coming in, the hospital system doesn't make it easy because it doesn't allow for time for such
Right.
support and discussions. But they really need it because this is life. And I always feel that there's more we need to be doing and supporting these families and young people to go through this period. So important. And I can't stress it enough because
Yes.
the decisions they're making, like I said, some of them have just been dropped and and they just find themselves after being supported for a long time, they just get dropped and they don't know how to go about it.
Absolutely. And I think also helping create opportunities for those families to connect to each other, because one of the amazing things about ADHD and these women is they are some of the biggest experts in random things I've never even thought of because they get hyperfixations on their kids' challenge with sleep or swallowing difficulties, food sensitivities, and they go down these deep dives. They are not a doctor, but my goodness, you would think they're a doctor in ferritin levels and clinics, and because they've managed it for those kids. And that
Yeah.
can benefit other families with younger kids who are, because we know ADHD is not going anywhere. We know there are people who have been through it all and people who are just starting out. And absolutely, a piece of it is, from the clinical side and as providers, what can we do? But I think also as providers, are there opportunities to connect, to create spaces so that those people can connect to each other? Because I think if you are a person who's community minded and wants to help everybody and fix everything, it can feel like it's up to you. And I
Hmm.
often feel like it's up to me. But then I talk with these women who are brilliant and have so much to offer. It is also it isn't just me. We all want this, but we just need the space to connect these people so that somebody who has just gotten a diagnosis can say, I am overwhelmed. I just left my amazing pediatrician's office. She is so phenomenal, has a podcast. I love her, but I do not know what to do next. And I don't know who to go to. And then someone can comment and say, this is a place I've gone. You are going to do so great. You're just starting out. I've been down that road. Ask me if you have any questions. So that is a big thing I'm trying to get going in my community here is just those peer support situations. Again,
Yeah.
knowing that within themselves, people with ADHD are brilliant. They are strong. They are
Mhm.
resourceful. They have grit. They have overcome so much and they have so much to teach each other. But they're
Mm.
also really busy and overwhelmed. And it can feel like the easiest thing to do is reinvent the wheel and figure it out
Mm.
yourself. But it isn't. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, one of the great things I read about your work is your visual tools, your playful checklist and metaphors. Can you share one of your signature tools or metaphor that has changed, the most lives and why does this work?
Yeah. So, one thing that I use a lot with families, especially families where I know one or more of the parents have ADHD, is a family parking lot. In our house, that looks like a whiteboard that's on the refrigerator because I personally felt like a lot of my dysregulation was at dinner time when the kids know where to find me. I am in the middle of trying to cook something, which means my working memory is taxed. I'm thinking about the timing of things coming out, and I've just come off of whatever kind of day I've had with my business and all the things I have to do. And then kids are like, "This is my chance. I want to have so and so over to sleep over. I need to get you to fill out this permission form. I need this, I need that, I need what." So the parking lot it's divided up by however many people are in your family, just drawn up with a quick and easy grid. We each have a box in it. If there's something my kids need from me, they write it on my parking space. And then alternatively, I can write things on their parking space. So if I know they are going to ask me to have extra screen time later, but I see shoes all over my house, I can write shoes on my son's thing. I can write water bottle on my daughter's thing. Whatever those things are, as we're building those strong habits, I have a place instead of me picking them up. I put them in a parking lot. So it takes it off of my brain, feeling like I have 5,000 things to do, puts it on the list of the person who needs to do it. It's visual, which is great because we know that auditory stimulation is especially disruptive and dysregulating, especially when you're in a moment where you're trying to think of something. So thinking about like when you are in you're in your thoughts, you're trying to figure out what you're about to do, and then someone says anything to you, even if they're like, "I like your shoes." That feeling we get in our body of stress and tension because we're like, "Oh, shoot, like that was nice, but I've just totally lost my train of thought."
Mm,
Especially at the end of the day where that is our working memory system and that is
yeah.
much more drained. So it gives us a holding place for things. It helps with the impulsivity of kids who are also like, I'm worried I'm going to forget to tell you to buy me a yearbook. So I feel like I need to say it to you right now, even though I can tell you're busy, because if I forget, I'm going to feel terrible. Well,
Mm,
now you have a place to put a thing so you don't forget. And I have the ability where we say after dinner, because that's usually
mm,
a good kind of lull. We've all eaten dinner. Everybody go to your parking lot and you take out whatever cars you can take out. So that gives me control of like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to get a sip of water.
mm,
And then I'm going to come to the parking lot and see
mm,
what of these things are today things that I can do real quick? Hey, buddy, I saw your thing about a sleepover. I'm going to text the mom right now. And then I can write next to it what I've done. Or it's buy concert tickets for this day. I'm like, today's been a long day. I'm going to write tomorrow's date on this. We'll come back to this tomorrow. Like, I just don't have the bandwidth to think about concert tickets today. But they've had an opportunity to get something off of their mind. They know it's on your radar, so they're not worried that
mm.
you forget about it. So they're not saying it 1,000 times, which is also dysregulating and overwhelming you because you have so
Yeah.
many things on your plate. So that is one that I've seen help a lot of families.
Yeah. It's just telling you I'm going to use that one in my clinic on Monday. I'm going to definitely use that one on Monday. Oh, great. So coming around to you know, we know that different cultures look at ADHD in different ways, and there's the issue of stigma and access. What's been your experience in addressing different cultures and how
Um,
they view ADHD and the concept of coaching? Have they been receptive to it?
yeah, fortunately, one thing I love about Birmingham is we do have a bit of a melting pot of people from different cultures and experiences here. There is definitely within that even different approaches or feelings on ADHD. Um, I hear, a lot more lately too about not wanting to have kids officially diagnosed with ADHD for fear of what that could mean for with the way data and technology and those things are out there, what that could mean potentially fears around career prospects, getting into school, or some kind of label being associated with them forever, which is disappointing that that's something that families feel like they have to take into consideration. There's also a lot of the teenagers I work with, they have access to accommodations
Yeah,
because of their diagnosis, but oftentimes don't want to use them
yeah,
because they feel like it increases their visibility, that they are considered here, they call that SPED, which is not my favorite thing that
yeah.
term, but I feel like that does create a barrier to access that people are worried that in admitting that they need certain tools, especially if it requires a formal diagnosis, they are not likely to use the supports that they really could benefit from. And often what we end up talking about is if they don't have a diagnosis of ADHD,
Mm.
if they don't have that label, fear of the label,
Yeah.
there probably are other labels that are going to be applied instead. So they are lazy, they are disrespectful, they are disobedient, they are, on and on and on.
Yeah.
In my practice when I first started, I did not have ADHD in the name of my business. I didn't want people to feel like if they wanted to leave a Google review or a comment or something or join a Facebook group for me, that it would be in some way outing them as having ADHD. And I was worried
Mhm.
that would be a barrier for some people. But at this point, I feel like we do need more examples of just how ADHD is not the only thing about us. It is
Yeah.
a part of how your brain processes and organizes information, but it is not who you are as a person.
Yeah.
It does not limit your future abilities. And actually, with people with ADHD and in general, we know that we can manage things better when we own them and look at them in an
Yeah.
honest and real way. So ignoring that we have ADHD or trying to pretend like we don't have ADHD is usually what exacerbates ADHD and creates more of a challenge. So,
Yeah.
that's something I'm definitely trying to work on here in Birmingham. So, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right in all the things that you've listed. And I think that's why a lot of education is needed,
Yes.
and public awareness, because I think the concept of what people have visualized ADHD in the past is actually
Yes.
very different, and people have seen it in a very negative way, even
Yes.
amongst clinicians. So it's been
Yeah.
quite a while that a lot of clinicians have moved to the point of understanding what ADHD is, because we used to get some negative things from clinicians saying, oh, you're just diagnosing these children with ADHD. Some of them are just, So
Right.
it's only after a lot of education and we say, look, you need to understand there is a neuroscience around this.
Right.
It is the brain. You know about the brain. If you've learned about this thing, so you need to understand how the brain manifests and relates to the body and behaviors is all connected. So there is a lot that we have to do. And I think for these communities, we need to look at what is relevant to them and actually use that to connect with them. It's one of the things I'm really keen on is breaking those barriers, because I've seen it a lot in my clinic when people come in from different cultures. It's the way they, uh, no, 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 doctor, no, 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 we're not going there. No, we don't know anybody like that. But you have to keep working at it, and it's one of the things I've been quite keen on doing.
Yeah. I love.
So, just getting on towards the end of our questions is there's so much ADHD content online. I'm sure if you scroll down a lot of media, it's like,
Yeah.
I think I used to get so frustrated before, and I think, oh my God, who's this now? Some influencer talking about ADHD.
Yes. Yes.
There used to be so much, there's a lot of content. And I think sometimes it gets confusing for families and actually filtering through what is coming out all the time. So, what's your advice for parents? What do you say to parents? Because most people spend their time online now, scrolling through one channel to the other, one channel to the other. So, what's your advice?
I mean, I think part of the increase in the awareness of ADHD obviously is good. I think it does help a lot of, especially, the kind of people scrolling on Instagram and Facebook. I think can be a lot of women who, all of a sudden feel seen, they feel understood in a way that they haven't before because of masking and feeling like they had to hide things about themselves. What I don't love is when it feels like this is the way I am because I have ADHD, deal with it. Right. So it's the having ADHD or having anything that, um, especially, where you're in a workplace and you're counting on somebody, like just because we have things that make it harder is not a reason to change the rules or to say, like, I just am late forever. Isn't that adorable? Like, this is just what it is. Right. Just saying, yes, this is something that's harder for me than maybe for other people. But then what do I do next? Am I okay with
Yeah.
that? Or do I say, because I now know it's not just that it's hard for me, it's hard for everyone with ADHD. What do I maybe need to add to the way that I do things or adjust the way that I do things so that I can be on time to the things that are important to me and show up for the people that matter, and somebody who is relied upon and who is important and successful and able to do things. So I think sometimes it can feel like, you know, a lot more of the isn't it so funny it's entertaining versus the but what do we do next? Like
Mm,
I think being able to own who you are is good,
mm,
but being able to look at is that in alignment with who you want to be perceived to be?
mm.
And then what adjustments can you make and where can you look to for help?
That's great advice. Yes. And we should move away from using the ADHD as just an excuse for continuing in the same pattern, but look at how things can, what else we need to do to function better.
Yeah.
Because I think that's great. Great. So your business, because it's very impressive how you've been able to build a very successful business, having been neurodivergent yourself, parenting neurodivergent children. And it's been impressive just listening to the systems that you've had. I like the way you said you look at yourself as a lab. I think it's one of, yes, just look at it as a lab. What are we experimenting with? What's working? That's one of my take homes from this. So, what has worked for you? How have you had to think in a different way from what it would be if you were running a typical business?
Absolutely. Yes. One, you know, my clients all have ADHD. So looking at how many reminders do I give my clients for sessions? What do those cancellation policies look like? What do those teaching opportunities look like when there's a no-show, versus a maybe neurotypical based business where somebody doesn't show up and there's just a no-show fee and we just hope that we see you next time. It's like, yes, you get one where you forgot, you didn't put it in your calendar. And then that's what we're going to talk about the next time I see you. So we're going to talk about what happened here. Like, did you get busy? Did something come up? Was this in your calendar? Did we need an extra reminder? Because if that happened here, the thought is this is kind of a way, again, in terms of experimentation, how you interact with me and how this coaching relationship looks can often show me little pieces of what are probably challenges that you're having across other arenas of your life.
Mm,
And how do we use these in a way as teaching opportunities if that is something that is interesting to the client? So I'm not, even with that no show policy, I'm not going to tell a client, like, well, you missed last week. So now's the time to own up and feel really embarrassed and talk about
mm,
it. But it's, if you would like, you have an opportunity. I understand you weren't able to come last week. Stuff comes up. If you feel like it would be helpful for us to look at what systems you were using to remember our appointment,
mm,
that is something that we could explore. And then giving them that opportunity if that is something that we're like, yeah, this happens to me a lot versus like, no, this was a one off. I actually never am a no show, but this
mhm,
horrible thing happened. Being able to have grace in that way. And then also, because I know I have ADHD and I have a lot going on, I look to people who are smarter than me, wiser than me. So I have a business coach that I work with who is a good filtering system. And I also have friends in my life who, again, ADHD. So I'll have 4,000 business ideas. And I always tell my husband, I'm like, I no longer have a boss who's like, no, Tiara, you can't try that. It's just me. I can try anything. So creating a system of people I trust who I can say, I was just in the shower and now I am going to start my own business on the side of this business where I sell shoes for people who are neurodivergent with trackers in them, right? Who can be like, no, Tiara, like that's funny, but let's have that guy here. And I can say, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was passionate about it 10 seconds ago, but I've moved on. So um, that has been really important for me
Your
as
household must be great fun.
it is. It is a lot of fun. And I think that's a big piece of like things can be really intense. There's a high intensity emotions are stimulating. Picking a fight with someone is a great thing to do when you're bored to our brain. We're like, I'm here. I'm in it. My heart is racing. This is really interesting. But being funny does the same thing. So
Mm,
leaning towards how do we break this tension? I'm going to start singing a random song. I make songs about things. And that works for me. I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but in my house, humor is a great way to stimulate that helps us move off and move towards somewhere constructive versus argument. So yeah, it's fun. There's a lot of singing.
That's great. Human versus argument. It's I'm just visualizing all the things. It's just lovely.
Yeah.
And you, what systems help keep your business going? Because obviously you've got to create systems that makes it work for you. What things have you put in place?
Yeah. So I have a CRM that I use now. And basically, as I'm doing things, I write down the way I do them. And then I work with that business coach and we talk about how can we create a system that does as much of this for me as possible. And then I keep track of what those systems are as I develop them. So I have checklists. A lot of times I don't even need the checklist. It's the creating the checklist that helps me stick with those protocols. But really, there's so much repetition. And then also the nice thing, with it being my business is when I feel like something is redundant or inefficient, being able to change those systems and adapt them so that they're more intuitive and along the lines of things I do, even if they maybe sometimes aren't actually as efficient, but they're just something that feels more natural and keep me in a flow. I
Mm.
prioritize that over necessarily having everything automated. Yeah.
Fabulous. Honestly, I could go on and on and on. It's been an amazing conversation. I've learned so much, and
This has been so fun.
it's been great. Just looking and having a different take on, but just knowing how executive function impacts on young people day to day, or impacts on the family. Taking a step back and not being hard on ourselves as parents, or and gradually supporting young people through that and realizing how hard some of those things are for them, and looking at and reframing our approach instead of being, oh, why haven't you done this, why haven't you done this, to what do we need to help you with to overcome that barrier. So it's been an amazing conversation, and you've given us lots and lots of tips, lots of practical strategies. I'm just buzzing with you know waiting for Monday when I've got young people with me and I'm going to have all this, more confidence sitting in front of parents and being able to tell them, no, you've just given us great, great strategies. It's just been fantastic. So what would you say? What sentence or what phrase or one thing that you would tell a parent whose child's been newly diagnosed with ADHD and just thinking, so what next? What's your advice to them?
Yeah. Um, this is gonna sound really overly simplistic, but one thing at a time.
Yeah.
One thing at a time. We can get really easily overwhelmed when we think of, okay, well, now I have this, I've got to find a counselor. I've got to get accommodations with the school. I've got to email the principal. I've got to talk to the teachers. I've got to, oh, we
Yeah.
have to change our whole family system. Now we need a parking lot or something. It can feel like you have to start everything simultaneously and everything is equally important. What is one thing that you can start with that feels like it would make the biggest difference, or not even the biggest, but just a difference
Mm.
today, and just do one thing at a time.
They can glad you say one thing at a time, because many times it's when we try to fix everything, we start juggling the balls and everything goes, haywire. So, as clinicians, and this message needs to go to clinicians, pediatricians, or everyone involved in assessing and managing children with ADHD. Sometimes we can be all very fixed on the nitty gritty of the day without thinking to what do you advise? How should we approach when we're dealing with families? What should we stop saying? And what should we start saying? Because this message is for us as clinicians.
Yeah. I think something to start saying maybe is, which I'm sure you're already saying, is just, um, what could we do to support you? What's something that we could do to support you? Or I think that would be helpful. Being able to say to a kid, ADHD is just how we describe the way that your brain works and the way you make choices. It is not anything to do with who you are as a person or what you're capable of. It's literally just the way your brain chooses what it's going to do next. And then stop saying some version of, like, not that you would say this, I can't imagine, but they just need to try harder. If they would just work harder, try harder. And then maybe stop saying to parents, and this is going to be counterintuitive because I do think these can be helpful, but I've had a lot of parents who say, like, they keep telling me, I should try a sticker chart or I should try this, or it can feel like giving them homework. And to parents who are already overwhelmed, starting on something like homework, especially out of the context of really how to use it. What does the sticker represent? Something like that can be such a nuanced tool, making sure that those goals are very specific, that they're, you know, if there's a sticker chart that's a 30-day sticker chart and they have to every day for 30 days clean the bathroom with a toothbrush, I don't know that that's useful versus if it's are your shoes in the shoe bin and what does that incentive look like? So I think sometimes we can oversimplify some of these strategies and tools without giving enough context to make parents feel like they can successfully use them and know
Yeah,
exactly what you mean by them and how to start.
yeah. And I think what you said is really true. And surprisingly, I get this on reports from schools when when they send questionnaires back to me when I'm assessing. He needs to try harder. He needs I say that all the time. I'm like, oh my God, he's got ADHD. It's not about the harder he tries. And I see that all the time and I think, oh no, oh no, I think this is one thing and that's why I like going back to the neuroscience to help them know that this is just something not within the young person's control. And it's for us to look at how to support them. Um, Fantastic. Tara, where can people find you?
Yes. So
Yes, a lot of our guests would connect with you, would want to connect with you. It's been great. And I like it because your service can be accessible to people,
mhm,
different places. So how
absolutely.
can people find you?
So on Facebook, it's the middle ADHD coaching. And then same on Instagram. My website is themiddlecoaching.net. And then that gives a link to a free discovery call. It says it's 30 minutes, but I have ADHD too. So it's usually longer than 30 minutes. Even if not to pursue services, I'm happy to just have conversations about what are kind of next steps. If you are in that one thing at a time place, helping you figure out what's the one thing that maybe you could do first to help building some momentum. So I'm happy to be a resource to families navigating this, helping connect them to other people. Or I also have online courses that will be coming out in a few months for just a parenting, you just got a diagnosis, here's where to start. What is ADHD? What does that look like? What are some simple structures to start in the home, one at a time, specific ways to do them, scripts to use, so that you're not feeling like you are having to figure it out while also walking your kids through it. So specifically, things to say, ways to broach that conversation, ways to have the kids interact with worksheets and all of that, all those resources and tools. So that'll be coming out in a few months. Also emailing me at tiara@themiddlecoaching.net. And then I can put people on a newsletter where you get resources like that, access to free or paid tools that are more expansive, as well as opportunities to ask me questions, read about new stuff with ADHD in the news, all that kind of stuff. Because fortunately, with my ADHD, my hyperfixation is ADHD. So I absolutely love pulling all these resources and things together.
Yeah.
Could talk about it endlessly. So yeah,
Amazing resources, I must say, that you put together. And
thank you.
please let us know once they're released so
Yes.
that we can signpost people to them because they're just what a lot of families need and ask for. Like I said, it's actually that post diagnosis phase. We've got the diagnosis. I think a lot of people, really want to get the diagnosis. Then when they get the diagnosis, it's like, okay, what do we do now? And some people don't want medication, but want something where the child can function, on a day-to-day basis. Is that what do we do situation?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for an
Thank you.
amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes,
I've
this has
learned
been
so much. I've learned a lot in terms of tools for working with young people with ADHD, supporting families. There's been a lot that we've talked about, and thank you so much for your time in doing this. I really appreciate it. And we look forward to having you back again. Thank you.
love that. Thank you for just having this podcast and for being somebody out in the field who is being the face of that information and education for families and helping with that stigma. It's not anything any one of us can do ourselves. It is everybody everywhere
Yeah.
just kind of taking up what you can do and in the
Yeah.
places that you can speak to. And I love that you are doing that to the best of your ability is such a wonderful gift for your community and for everyone who finds this
Yeah.
podcast. And I'm happy to share that along as well, because I truly believe in your mission. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you for, I believe in a lot of collaboration. And that's one thing I've loved with speaking to guests is because I always become more knowledgeable. I always get something out of it that I
Yeah.
then take to my families. And it's just been great. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
As we always say, early intervention leads to better outcome. And early intervention can only be achieved by early diagnosis. So thank you for listening into the series today. I know some of the things we've talked about today would probably have generated some questions or need to seek clarification. So I'm happy to take questions, and I'll invite you to send your questions to eim@drtakon.com. Thank you for listening in.